We all know the routine. You sit in a heavy leather chair. A lead apron is draped over your chest to protect your organs from radiation, and a technician tells you to bite down on a tiny, cold piece of plastic. You hold perfectly still as a massive mechanical arm sweeps around your head in a slow, precise semicircle, emitting a low, electronic hum. The panoramic dental X-ray. We subject ourselves to it every few years, trusting that the machine is just a simple diagnostic tool, a clean piece of medical engineering, mapping out the calcified alignment of our teeth and jawbone. We look at a dental clinic as a sterile haven of health, hygiene, and white porcelain. But the scanning systems, we open our mouths, for under the bright fluorescent lights, don't just exist to capture images. They sit over a network of frequencies that were never logged in the medical manufacturing textbooks. And if the calibration sequence experiences an unlisted network error, you realize the plastic bite block isn't stabilizing your jaw. It is anchoring your nervous system. My name is Eric Vance. For 8 years, I worked as a senior biomedical hardware diagnostic engineer for a major medical imaging conglomerate that supplies radiological equipment to clinics across North America. My division's responsibility was simple, yet deeply haunting. We audited corrupted software logs from Panoramic scanners that had been flagged for unusual electronic behavioral cycles. To the outside world, these recalls were routine corporate decisions designed to fix broken rotation gears, faulty sensor arrays, or minor software synchronization delays. But the hardware anomaly we received in the spring of 2011 was not a simple mechanical failure. The shipment contained a complete panoramic scanner assembly recovered from a private orthodontic practice in a quiet, isolated town in New England. In the official corporate manifests, the unit was cataloged as a standard model upgrade return. But within the classified internal data dumps sent to our basement lab, it was isolated under a single, disturbing internal project title: Project Panoramic. The executive board didn't want us to patch an image rendering bug. They wanted us to build a physical quarantine around the scanner's main processing logic board. 3 weeks prior, the machine had been running a routine diagnostic scan on a patient. The automated network logs flagged a catastrophic code desynchronization. When the mechanical arm reached the exact midpoint of its sweep, directly behind the patient's skull, the system froze. The machine's internal radiation detectors reported an output frequency that was physically impossible, a localized energy surge that exceeded the hardware bus limits, drawing enough electrical power from the facility grid to cause the copper wiring inside the laboratory walls to hum and smoke. My job was to run the captured digital data streams and raw image files from that corrupted machine through a series of forensic waveform isolation matrices to find out what was hijacking the sensor arrays. We were told to examine the latency. We were told to map the pixel density arrays. But when we finally processed the low-frequency electrical currents bouncing back from that plastic byte block component, we didn't just find a broken circuit board. We find a predatory, cybernetic entity that feeds on human nerve tissue and bone architecture. And what is growing inside those old medical components is the reason why major imaging companies quietly engineered massive hardware redesigns in the early 2010s, permanently phasing out older panoramic mechanisms under the guise of digital sensor efficiency. The text that follows is the unedited, minute-by-minute log of my final shift at that diagnostic facility. Put on your headphones, turn out your lights, because the machine isn't scanning your teeth. It is pulling your central nervous system directly through the plastic slot. According to my personal technical journals, the true horror of Project Panoramic begins when the mechanical arm takes more than 45 seconds to complete its rotation around a patient's skull. That is the point where the electronic frequency ceases to be a diagnostic sweep and begins to establish a physical interface with the user's brainstem. On March 14, 2011, at exactly 3 a.m, we connected the prototype scanner to our laboratory's heavy acoustic anechoic monitoring booth. The machine was wired directly into our diagnostic hardware via fiber optic data feeds to eliminate external noise. I sat in the observation booth, the glowing toxic green monitors casting long, distorted shadows on the concrete walls. I put on my studio headphones and opened the raw data stream. At first, the feed was standard digital noise, a flat green line on the frequency analyzer, accompanied by the classic scrolling black and white jawbone image rendering on the workstation monitor. It was a cold, clinical, mechanical frequency. Then the internal temperature sensors on the plastic byte block began to plummet. But the component wasn't cooling down because of an air conditioning malfunction. The telemetry showed the tip of the byte block dropping from room temperature down to a freezing 20 degrees in less than 3 seconds, while the machine's central digital interface screen began to pulse with an intense, toxic green luminescent light that cast long, jagged shadows across the polished concrete floor. The internal circuits were frosting over, while the device was drawing maximum electrical current from our primary power grid. On the audio feed, the standard mechanical hum of the rotating arm suddenly shifted, melting into a sound that made my chest tighten with airless dread. It was a wet, heavy, rhythmic tearing sound. Click, scrape, stretch, squelch. It sounded exactly like someone dragging a heavy iron wire through raw, wet jaw muscles. The micro switches inside the machine's chassis picked up a deep, subaudible vibration that caused the concrete floor beneath my desk to visibly shake. Then came the voice. It didn't use the workstation's built-in speakers. The entity was vibrating the copper filaments inside my headset wires, reversing the electrical current to turn my own headphones into a throat, speaking directly into my ears. The voice was a shifting, layered mosaic of synthetic tones. It sounded like the automated text-to-speech dental appointment reminders of 1,000 different clinics, all playing the exact same words in perfect unison, their syllables chopped up, layered over a deep, wet, choking rattle. It spoke an ancient, guttural dialect of an unmapped language that had no business existing inside a modern medical database. I ran the signal through our real-time linguistic decryption matrix, isolating the vocal track from the electronic static. The translation grid slowly filled my monitor with text. The voice said, "The needle of the radiation has pierced the pattern of the bone. The skin of the scanner is thin now. We taste your nerve roots on the plastic of the block. We are climbing up the copper wire to harvest the meat." The audio levels spiked into the red so violently that the frequency monitors shattered their graphical rendering limits, leaving my headphones screaming with a sharp, white-hot tone of feedback. I pulled the headset off, my skin breaking out into a cold, prickling sweat, my breath caught in my throat. The project director immediately ordered the fiber optic lines to be severed, killing the connection to the booth. The security team entered the booth to retrieve the prototype component. When they pulled the device out and laid it on the stainless steel lab table, the entire team backed away in absolute horror. The plastic body of the bite block wasn't melted or scorched by an explosion. It had been dissolved from the center outward. The thick, reinforced resin housing was covered in a thick, dripping, toxic green biological residue that reeked of copper and decaying organic flesh. The mechanical mount was pitted and scarred, as if it had been exposed to a powerful biological digestive acid, and sticking out from the melted seams of the plastic reader slot was a fragment of something physical. It was a collection of small, translucent strands of human nerve tissue, over 6 inches long, twitching violently on the table, their root endings reacting directly to the fluorescent lights of the lab. The director didn't hesitate. He ordered the security team to destroy the device with an industrial plasma torch, burning the organic material to a black ash before sealing the remains inside a heavy lead canister. We were forced to sign top-secret non-disclosure updates, our clearance levels locked down under threat of immediate federal prosecution. They told the facility staff it was a sensor capacitor explosion anomaly. They told us the audio was an electromagnetic loop, but they were lying. 2 weeks later, our department received a raw data package from a residential smart home network hub located in a suburb just 5 miles from our facility. A patient had vanished from his home hours after returning from a wisdom tooth extraction appointment. The room had been found completely empty, the front door locked from the inside, his personal laptop still active on the kitchen table, flashing with a paused cloud copy of his latest Panoramic digital X-ray file. The data dump included the interior bedroom security camera video and the synchronized audio telemetry from that night. I sat alone in the server room, loading the file onto my terminal. The video was grainy, shot in high-contrast infrared night vision. The time stamp on the screen read 03:33 a.m. The video showed the patient sleeping in his bed, his jaw heavily bandaged. Suddenly, the laptop screen on his desk panned from its normal colors to a brilliant, toxic green color, illuminating the entire bedroom in an eerie, radioactive glow. The image on the screen didn't display teeth anymore. The speakers burst into life with a low, vibrating, sub-bass frequency that caused the security camera lens to visibly shake. And then, the video showed a structural anomaly forming right out of the digital rendering pixels of the jawbone image. The space directly surrounding the laptop screen wasn't empty air anymore. The infrared light cut through a thick, swirling vortex of black, smoky vapor that seemed to bleed directly out of the graphic file's dissolved boundaries. And stretching out of that digital vortex, reaching toward the sleeping user's jaw, was an appendage that made my fingers freeze on the keyboard. It was a hand, but it wasn't a human hand. It was a massive, pale, multi-jointed arm made of twisted digital artifacts, bleeding muscle fibers, and thousands of tiny, calcified teeth fused into the flesh like scales. It didn't have skin. It was raw, exposed tissue, moving with a fast, jerky, robotic speed. It hovered inches above the user's cheek, the fingers rapidly twitching in perfect sync with the frequency of the machine's original scan line. At that exact second, the audio speakers on my console emitted a sound that made the hair on my arms stand straight up. It was a chorus of human voices screaming inside the data stream, a frantic, breathless wail of pure agony that matched the exact vocal frequencies of every patient who had gone missing in that county over the last 10 years. The file wasn't just generating a signal. It was pulling acoustic imprints from the lost, using their neurological memory to stabilize the frequency. The hand clamped around the user's jaw. The video feed instantly went to absolute black static. The data packet ended there. The next morning, our facility was cleared out by government officials. They seized our hard drives, wiped the primary database, and permanently closed Project Panoramic. The official records state the neighborhood experienced a localized electrical grid failure due to a faulty substation transformer. The inventory warehouses holding those specific Panoramic motherboards were cleared out and crushed under military supervision. I left the biomedical conglomerate that month. I live in an old, unmapped cabin now, far away from the medical centers, deep in the wilderness, where there are no digital networks, no imaging clinics, and no scanners. I don't visit the doctor anymore. I maintain my health through primitive, basic means, and I keep my mouth completely clear of any modern medical diagnostic machinery. Because last night, a minor localized storm passed over my ridge. The power grid flickered. The digital display on my old shortwave radio turning a pale, toxic green color for less than 3 seconds. And as the display shifted, the mechanical dental mirror sitting on my wash basin began to buzz. Not its normal static metal rest, but a frantic, irregular electronic drone, matching the exact rhythm of the 2011 scan line frequencies. I held the handle of the metal mirror to my ear, and through the vibrating steel, I heard a wet, automated whisper calling out my name from the glass reflection. "Eric," the whisper said, a cold, synthetic rasp that made my blood instantly turn to ice. "The alignment is rendering over your roof. The database is updated. We are extracting your roots tonight." Humanity has spent the last few decades building a massive, complex network of medical diagnostics, clinical safety, and digital imaging, believing that our sterile tools and health charts make us the masters of the bodies we protect. But we didn't realize that the electronic patterns we map into our health systems are just channels cut into the flesh of a living organism. A vast, underground entity that is slowly learning to read our anatomy from the inside out. The company has crushed the prototype motherboards of Project Panoramic, but you cannot delete a neurological scan pattern from the grid. You cannot stop an automated extraction frequency from executing. Next time your dental clinic flashes a green indicator light during a routine checkup, don't look too closely at the reflection off the scanning arm. Because down there in the circuitry, where the frequency is absolute, the machine has stopped diagnosing your body, and it is preparing to harvest your meat.